hit on some pretty popular groups so far, but this time I'm going to do something a little more under the radar. Back in 1975 and 1976, my father was in the Air Force, and we were stationed in West Germany for a while. And I was a kind of a youth DJ, and I'm the geeky 13-year-old kid with all the records, and the DJ broke his back, and they dragged me down there to play and everything. And I was very introverted, but I managed to do it, and kind of brought me out of my shell a little bit. But anyway, one day, I hear this unusual song on the German radio station, and it was called Daddy Cool. And God, what an interesting sound. I've never heard anything like this. It was very, it was kind of the German pop sound at the time. But what I didn't know was that there was a singer of what they call Schlagers, tacky, weird German pop music, named Frank Farian. And he had produced this new, he called it a group, but it wasn't a group yet. But it's basically the first single I heard was called Daddy Cool, and the group he ended up calling Boney M. That wasn't their first record. Their first single actually came in 1975, and it had none of the people on that cover on it. It was Frank Farian and a bunch of studio musicians. And this song's cool. A lot of nice bass, neat vocals, great beat. I love it. It wasn't the first song that I heard. This grabbed me. But the first song I heard was their second single. Back when by now he had brought everybody on board, and it was called Daddy Cool. And I just thought that was a really neat song. It was released in the United States a little bit later. Didn't do anything. Most of the records didn't. In fact, many of them weren't even released here. But anyway, Boney M kind of became. I started playing them during the dances, and the youth all danced to it. They liked it. When I came back to the United States, I brought their records with me. Everybody liked it. Turns out they were kind of a little cult following over here. So over the years, I collected Boney M. And when I got rid of my records, I got rid of my Boney M collection, and a lot of it I've never been able to replace. So I've been able to piece my collection back together, still missing some important pieces, but I also found some that I couldn't find back then. So obviously the very first single is Baby Do You Want to Bump? Heck of a lot of fun. Not actually sure which country this issue is from, but it was issued in a lot of, I think it was even issued in the United States. Anyway, that first single that grabbed me was called Daddy Cool. This is the German issue. I'm a big fan of the Hansa label, great quality vinyl pressings, and sometimes the single mixes are different from the album versions, and we'll delve into that a little bit more later. And then they had one more single from that first album. It was called Sunny, and it also had a non-LP B-side called New York City, and also on that nice black Hansa label that I love so much. But anyway, the first album was released in two versions. The German version, the original, is called Take the Heat Off Me. Kind of a crazy cover. Supposed to come with a poster. My original copy did. This one does not. But the German album has Baby Do You Want to Bump as the last song inside one. Also, it's a great remake of Bob Marley's No Woman, No Cry. But anyway, this says Do You Want to Bump in its long version. And it has the neat black Hansa label that I love. Just love that. And then in America and Canada and other parts of the world, Baby Do You Want to Bump had been issued on another label, and they couldn't put it on the album. So the cover is the same, no poster. But there's a different song inside one about the same length called Help Help, which you couldn't get on the German version of the album. Kind of fun like that. The American and Canadian issues of that debut were on the Atco label, and this is a Canadian pressing. Beautiful copy too, beautiful. I mean, the German records really sound good. This one comes close. It comes really close. Anyway, came time for the second album, and one of their biggest hits, Ma Baker. And it had, of course, the black Hansa label. Many of you would know the B-side Still I'm Sad because it was done by Ritchie Blackmore's Rainbow, of all groups. A lot of other groups did it too, don't get me wrong. And they also have a rare version of that single that has their tour dates on the back. And it's a different issue. I think it's from Holland, so it has an orange Hansa label. Kind of neat. And then They had albums at the time, but it was the singles that made them popular. So this is their next hit, Belfast, which was removed from the album in many parts of the world because it was considered controversial. And this had a different Hansa label. I believe it's an older label, but I never really got the history on the label because I never saw it until much later. But anyway, have that. And the second album was called Love for Sale, and this cover, because of its partial nudity, was edited, and even in the United States, it was released without Belfast and with a different, more tame. Basically, this was the front cover art, picture they used in the front cover. So, and this is supposed to have a poster. My original copy did. This one does not. That's my own fault. But my original copy did not have this other Hansa label design, so I thought that was kind of a neat trade-off. I'm still hoping to find those with the posters again. Anyway, back to their singles. Then they had their big hit. This was their mother lode. This was the big one, Rivers of Babylon. This was their biggest hit. It was their only hit in the United States that made it under the top 40. And just huge. They were outselling the Beatles at the time. This group was big. So this is my German original. And then this is my kind of beat up Dutch original. I think this one also has the black label, Hansa. And then the American companies being the little cheap, whatever, plain sleeve, company sleeve. But there you have it. Now I'll go ahead and show you the album. The original German album. This is the one most of you may have seen if you've seen it at all. It turns out, and I didn't know this until a few years ago, but when I finally got to replace my German copy of the album, and I put it on, and I start playing it, and I'm like, wait a minute, this is different. And it turns out the record was first released with very different versions of some of the songs, much longer, and then Frank Farian, the producer, shortened them a bit, and I got version 2, and I didn't know it was version 2. So I'm playing these songs like, this is different. Wait, this is different. This is different. So this is kind of a fun thing for me. So I have version 2 of the album, which is not horribly rare, but I didn't know about it. I'd love to find version 1. I really would. This album had a neat other artists on the label and all that other stuff. And it had the Hansa label on one side, and for the first time they did something fun. They did this on the main label. And just a great, wonderful, wonderful record that is. And of course, Rivers of Babylon is the keynote. The original German pressing did come with these postcards, which I do have. And then I got the American version, which is I think it's the 4th version of the album, where the songs are kind of cut down to basically what became their final mixes. Pretty much what you get on CD. And I'll show you the CDs in a second. But the label has the typical Sire label at the time with the little Hansa logo there. And this is the version of the album I always knew. I never knew there were others, so it's kind of a neat thing to find. And of course they had a big hit, Rasputin, at least overseas. It didn't do much over here, of course, but this is this is close to where they stopped issuing the records here. Here's a picture sleeve from, I think this is from Belgium or something. Same label. And then they had another big hit, and this is later on their Christmas album, and this was issued in the United States, Mary's Boy Child. And then I did some trading a few years ago, and somebody sent me a rare black picture sleeve of it on the Carrera label. I think it's from France. And then somebody sent me another version of it with another picture sleeve. I think it's from Spain or Belgium. I can't keep track of them all. And then they had one more record in America, and the American one, generic sleeve, generic everything. I finally managed to get the German issue. The German records almost always have some kind of picture sleeve or art sleeve. This was no exception. Much longer version of the song. Really, really great. Called Dancing in the Streets. And after this, the records in America kind of came to a screeching halt, except for a little bit here and there. So everything else after that kind of hit hodgepodge. Now I'll show you that in a minute. Their fourth album is a lot of fun. It was still issued in Canada. It's called Oceans of Fantasy. Great album. And great cover. And even more fun is the cover, unless you get it in some countries like Canada where it's an added poster, the cover folds into its own poster. Obviously, if you put the poster on the wall, you have nothing to put your record in, but it's kind of a neat, kind of a lot of fun. And of course, it had the lyric sleeve finally. And for the first time, their own, you can call it a specialty label, glamour label, whatever. But just a lot of fun. Great album. Precious Wilson of Eruption has a lead vocal in this album as a guest vocalist. And they even went crazy. They did a picture disc of the album. Not the highest quality, but it's still, what fun. I mean, this is just a fun thing to own. I'm glad. I actually gave this to some friends, and then a number of years ago, they're like, we're getting rid of our records. You want this back? I'm like, yes! So, they got it back. Anyway, that album had a few singles. Gotta Go Home. This has been sampled to death and used on lots and lots of other records. I also have the 12-inch single of Gotta Go Home from Europe, obviously, from Germany. And there's a clear vinyl version. I have the black vinyl, but that's fine. I like black vinyl is good. These are incredibly high quality records. This could use a little bit of an upgrade, but it still sounds fantastic. And then they had the hit I'm Born Again, kind of a gospel song. Bahama Mama on the B-side was almost like another hit. And then they did a greatest hits album. Had a neat gold shiny cover with die-cut sleeve, and every now and then I'll see them. They're just ripped to all shreds. But had 2 new songs on it. I See a Boat on the River and the remake of Smoke's classic My Friend Jack, which I like their take on this. So I have that. And then I lucked out and managed to get the 12-inch single with the very long versions of the songs. And then, of course, it has that neat Boney M label. And then they did, let's see, which one's next? I think it was this one, Malika. A little more, they come off as it kind of goes with the image of the band a little bit. So Malika and Consuela Baez. And this has a little promotional sheet with the 45 that I have. And then they did another one, Felicidad. Margarita, and Strange was a non-LP. Actually, these are all non-LP songs, but Strange was one of their harder to get songs for a long time. And then I do have the 12-inch single of that with the very long versions of the songs. And it has a neat blue label. And then things get a little more interesting now because the album with the funnest title is about to come out, and it started out with the single Bunununus and We Kill the World. It's actually a double A side. This is a 12-inch single, basically with the album versions of the songs, but at the time has the neat label again. And it was issued on a single. And then came the actual album. And Bunununus. This is supposed to have a poster. My original did. This one does not. It's half-speed mastered. It does sound amazing, and I love this cover art. Just fantastic. And there were a couple different issues of this, but this is the original single album. Has the blue label we've seen a few times now. There was also a Doppel album with longer versions of some of the songs. Didn't come with the poster, didn't come with the inner sleeve, but it had 2 records in a cover and longer versions. And I regret selling that because I've never seen it again, and I really, really miss that. If any of you have it sitting out there and you don't play it, just send it to me. I'll give it a really good home, okay? I really will. A few years ago, the albums have come out repeatedly on CD. The first issues were pretty good sounding, but nothing fancy. The second issues were remasters, which are too loud. And then they did one of these little sets over in Europe where you get the albums in mini card sleeves. And they do have the bonus tracks. Some of them are kind of rare, unreleased B-sides and things like that. A rare Liz Mitchell solo single here from one of the singers of the group. And so they have the little card sleeves. Ironically, this has Baby Do You Want to Bump on it, and the cover says Help Help. They really just kind of throw these together when they do them. It has the kind of a reproduction of the old Columbia 6-eye label for the disc, just like they do in the American one. So, Take the Heat Off Me, Love for Sale, Night Flight to Venus without the gatefold, Oceans of Fantasy without the gatefold, and Boo-Noo-Noo-Noos. But a lot of fun. A lot of neat way to own those albums on CD. Because I don't really need the other packaging for it. It's just irrelevant when you have the records. Anyway, now we're getting to an album, 10,000 Light Years. And the one man on the group was replaced. Bobby Farrell was, I guess, fired by Frank Farian and replaced by Reggie Sebo. But the sound was the same because Frank Farian did the male voice. He produced Milli Vanilli later, so he's good at copying voices. So, in fact, two of these people never really sang on the records. The other two did. But this is a very, very good album. It really is. There's a good remake of Tommy Rose Dizzy. Excellent. Nice, another space-themed album like Night Flight to Venus was. A lot of fun. And, this one also has that nice blue Boney M label. And this one actually does have the poster inside. And there's a later version of the album with a bonus track, but the bonus track is not essential because you can get it elsewhere. But it's basically the album art on a big giant poster. And then, I guess I could show you. This is the remastered CD. It has a couple of B-sides. And so, I mean, that's basically the packaging for them. It's pretty much low frills. They should be shot for that. Great packaged albums and lousy packaged CDs. Then there was a single called Jumbo. A lot of fun. Really fun song. And now the labels are starting to go over to that weird screen printed, painted, whatever you want to call it. Still really high quality. Great sleeve. Fun song. And then they did a single that actually did get released in the United States. The German and French issue had a pretty boring cover. This is the French issue on Carrere. And then, for some reason, I didn't even know it was issued in America until one day I saw it in a store many years ago. But the front cover, nah. Back cover, that's the cover that ended up to be the original CD cover and compilation album that was titled after this. But this has a 9-minute long version of the song. And when the song was issued in Germany, when they said the long United States mix, it was actually shorter than this. So the American was always the version to get, and it was on the American Carrere label. Nice piece to have, and it's not very rare. You see it in dollar bins every now and then. And then it did get released in Germany when they tagged it onto this album. It's not on my copy, but I do believe this has the same version as the American one. I had another copy that did not, but I just don't remember. Too many things to remember in my old age. And then they released Somewhere in the World for some reason from that other album. They released that next. And then there was a compilation, and it's been reissued on CD. This one is kind of a hodgepodge because it has the long versions that are shorter and some things that were not originally. The remaster has songs from when they got back together. But I wanted it for the extra tracks. But this has been issued on CD 3 different times. The original was my favorite, and I wish I still had it. And then the producer decided to bring Bobby Farrell back, so Boney M featuring Bobby Farrell, back to the black label. And then there was a 12-inch single of that. It's kind of fun to have that. And went back to the black Hansa label for that as well. And somewhere in there, East Germany, before East and West were reunited, did have a 4-track 7-inch EP on Amiga. Kind of a fun thing to have. And then Frank Farian decided, well, that's it for Boney M. Let's do one last record. And Gone is the logo. Kind of a cheesy cover. And this is something that took me years to find. It's the original German issue, direct metal mastered on Hansa. I once had a Canadian copy and sold it, regretting it because then I never saw it again. But I managed to get this last year for not a lot of money, surprisingly. But I've seen this record change hands for quite a bit of money at times because the German issue was never printed in great numbers and had the black label again. And did have a neat CD. This has been issued on CD about 2 or 3 times. This is the remaster with some bonus tracks, and I keep a bonus disc in there with some. There's a lot of long versions and alternate releases, and my version better than theirs. But then they also had on the album a remake of Stevie Wonder's My Sharia Moore, which is very, very good. The B-side Sample City was the most classic, one of the more classic Boney M songs on the album. And I have the 12-inch single of that. At the US Club Mix, I've never actually seen it in America, and both songs are in a much longer version. So if I want that 6-minute version of Sample City, there you go. And then I'll show you this first. In between there, they quickly put out another Bobby Farrell, King of Dancing. It's basically a Boney M song revamped, and he's pictured on the I Dance as the 5th member back in the band, but you know they didn't really have him do much. Some voiceovers and maybe some background vocals every now and then, but the Bobby Farrell single was just kind of issued in the middle of the heyday on the last album. And then there was the hit Young, Free, and Single, and I have the maxi, but I don't think I have the I don't have the 7-inch, just the maxi single with the long versions. Also has that neat black Honda label. And then there was one final single, a kind of a cheesy, tacky song called Bang Bang Lulu, kind of on the edge of raunchy lyrics, but not quite. Kind of a tricky one to get sometimes, but there it is. There's a 12-inch single that I don't have of that. And I even have a promotional single facts sheet for that single. And then they started with all the remixes and reunion albums and things like that. And they had the PWL people who did a Rick Astley do a remix album of their stuff, and the Lambada mix of Baby Do You Wanna Bump. Some of that stuff's kind of forgettable. And then he kind of started reforming the band with different people, but kept the lead singer. So they did this one song called Stories, and it has an opening where they sampled Jimmy Castor doing a spoken part before the song kicks in. And this song was doomed to fail because it's loaded with erotic sounds in the background as the record is playing. So it would be kind of difficult to get that played on the radio with songs like that. And in fact, it's kind of makes me uncomfortable a little bit. The song itself is very catchy, but I guess Prince was getting away with a lot of that stuff at the time, so they thought that would be fun. There were some mega mixes like I have on CD here. Sometimes you get a couple different versions of the songs. There was a 1993 remix of Brown Girl in the Ring, which was a lot of fun. A remix of Ma Baker, classic hit. And then there was a couple of remixes with Horny United, Somebody Scream, also Ma Baker. Then there was a greatest hits album called 20th Century Hits, where he tried to rebrand it as Boney M 2000. They're just remixes. I also had this with a cartoon cover, but I sold it. This one also came with a video CD with a couple music videos on it. Kind of an odd thing to have. And then somewhere in there, 3 of the 4 members got together, called themselves Boney M without permission, and did one single. And it was released in the UK called Everybody Wants to Dance Like Josephine Baker. There was a repress of this where the Boney M name was removed and their last names were on the cover instead, because they got in trouble for this, but there it is. And of course on a different label, Imperative. So kind of a neat piece to have. I guess there was a CD single. I've never seen it. And in the recent years, there hasn't been a whole lot of activity, but there are 3 discs with some of their 12-inch single mixes on. Some of them were actually taken from vinyl sources. This is how you get songs like Help Help on CD, or the long version of Ribbons of Blue, which is very hard to get. It's typical. Volume 3 is coming back out on CD. Volume 2 is dead and gone, but nothing spectacular there. And then one last thing to show you. And just last month, this was issued. There's a box set version with a t-shirt and a reproduction of the first album. I just opted for, this is a 3 CD set.
Nu har legendariske Boney M 40 års jubilæum. Det fejres med 2 eksklusive bokse med 3 CD'er eller 3 DVD'er, som indeholder alle de store hits, men også sange og remixes, som aldrig tidligere er udgivet. Boney M Diamonds. Køb den i dag.
Neat shiny cover. Folds out pretty neat. They're basically their 40th anniversary thing. And it has most of their hits, some of them when they're very rare single mixes or mixes that hadn't been releases before, alternate mixes or an added verse. And then disc 3 has 2 new songs on it, one of which is called Song of Joy, which is quickly becoming one of my favorite Boney M songs, and then some actual tasteful remixes done currently for the current market. So that's everything I have by Boney M right now. For some reason, they've stuck with me. They're huge in Europe, not big here, so a lot of the Americans here might go, but they were a lot of fun. When it all ended, Frank Farian took the band. It got rid of the singers. He did Far Corporation, and then he did Milli Vanilli, so he kind of took some weird turns there. But Boney M was still the benchmark. He took a classic era of schlagers and somehow reinvented himself as something cool. But they were always a lot of fun to me, and even now I may listen to Nightwish, and I may listen to Chicago, and I may listen to the blues, and I may listen to jazz, but every now and then I still like to go back and put on Boney M and just enjoy some fun old pop music. Some of it danceable and just a lot of fun.